Hey guys, today I wanted to go through my first entire year of gardening where I started everything from seed, planted it into the garden. There were a few plants that I bought from local nurseries, but hey, why not? Support local too. So I wanted to share with you guys my journey, things that went well, things that went bad, things that I learned, tips and tricks, and just kind of my overall experience for the first time growing from seed, planting it into the garden, and then harvesting. Let's jump right in and start with, I'll explain kind of what size I use. So I have four 4 by 10 foot raised beds. And then I also had an in-ground garden that was probably, let's see, probably 25 feet long and 5 feet wide. So that was kind of the amount of space that I used. I also have my 4 by 6 foot beds. I have 4 of those that I also used, but a lot of those have perennials in them, like strawberries and my parsley and asparagus. So the one bed I did use for potatoes, and then the other bed I used for onions. So there wasn't a lot that came out from the smaller area. A lot of it was from my bigger area over in the new garden that we built. And so it was just really exciting to see what I could get out of that space. I feel like there's a lot of things that I could have done even better, but hey, that's why we learn. So I just wanted to jump in and share with you guys kind of some of my experiences. So we're going to start with things that did not go well. There's always those things, right? So there weren't a lot, honestly. I feel like it was a pretty good experience. I didn't overwhelm myself with a lot of different variety of foods. I had tomatoes, peppers, basil, peas, beans, radishes, beets, kale, spinach, lettuce, kohlrabi, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, carrots, and then I also had some container planting. So I do have the green stock original tier planter, and in there I did have Cherry Falls tomatoes, which are a cherry tomato variety, and I also have like some of my herbs. I have chives, marjoram, thyme, dill, lettuces, nasturtiums, and things like that I had in the green stock. Starting there, one thing I struggled with was aphids on my tomato plants, and nasturtiums attract aphids, but the nasturtium plants just couldn't get big enough to really thrive in those like container sizes. One thing I would do differently there is just get the trailing nasturtium variety, which is a nasturtium that is made to be in hanging baskets, so their root systems don't require as much room. So it kept the aphids away from the tomatoes for the most part, but when those plants just couldn't keep up, they attacked the tomato plants, which it didn't really harm my harvest because I got it under control before the fruit really started setting. So that was one thing I would do differently there. I really liked having my herbs in that green stock. I thought it was just a really good amount of space to, I don't need that many herbs of each kind. It was really nice to just have, chives or cut and come again, and like you can just really take a lot out of that space. In the green stock, that honestly was the only thing I really had a problem with, was just not giving the nasturtiums enough room to really do beneficially what they were supposed to do. And then I also did have squash or zucchini squash. I did in like a really big pot. That was one thing. I got too ambitious and put 3 plants in one pot. Yes, the pot was like massive, but it wasn't enough room to sustain 3 plants. So I'll do that again. I really liked having it in the pot because they're trailing, and it just makes it like you can move it around if it's not getting enough sun, wherever. And it would have thrived in there. I did get quite a few zucchini off of there because I remember I made zucchini bread quite a bit, and I also did some roasted zucchini and things like that. So I was really impressed with that. The one thing I would change though, just one plant per container. I didn't thin them out because I was like, oh, I'll just leave them because they'll all grow great, and they didn't. So thin your plants because they need space. And then, so in the first raised bed early on in the season, I did cool weather crops like beets and radishes and carrots and things like that. One thing I struggled with was germination for my red beets, and that was just a user error because I didn't keep the soil moist enough. And if I were to do it again, I would cover the seeds or the soil probably with like a mulch or straw or something like that, because I feel like it just contains a lot more moisture. Or, you know, going into this next season, I will have drip irrigation, which is going to make it a lot easier to just be mindful of keeping the soil moist. So that was just user error. There wasn't anything wrong. I did great with the red beets. I canned them into pickled red beets. They were phenomenal. We ate all of them already, which it didn't make like a whole bunch because I didn't plant a whole bunch of them. I just wanted to see kind of what I can do. So those did really well. The radishes were amazing. I wish I would have succession sowed those. So I really recommend succession sowing for cool weather crops into as far into the summer as you can. So I'm a zone 6A. So I have quite a bit of cool weather before I go into my like heat of the summer. So that was one thing I wish I would have done, is succession sowing with that and carrots, but I learned. Another thing with carrots, I did them just like sowing them into the like soil and not covering them very much. It's because they are like tiny seeds and you can't cover them very much, but you have to keep them really moist. One thing I did change about that was I used pieces of wood, just like thin pieces of wood, and left it on top of the moistened soil and seeds until they started to pop out of the soil, and that helped germination amounts a lot more. So that was one tip that worked for me, is using wooden boards to lay over top of your carrots. That helped a lot. And then, so we'll jump over cucumbers. I did an arch trellis of cucumbers. I did 2 varieties, and they did okay. I don't know if it was a deficiency in soil, but they like got yellow and crunchy really quick, and they shouldn't have. And I also don't know, was it a lack of root space because they were kind of close to the edge of the raised bed. So there was that, and maybe it was just, yeah, a lack of water, a lack of space. I'm not sure. So I'm going to try those again. They did really well. Like, or not really well. They did good. I got cucumbers off of those plants. So I'm definitely going to do that again. I really like how much space the arch trellises saved. So that was definitely a plus. And then going into the next bed was like, honestly, mostly a fail. I had cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cabbages, and I was doing really well with staying on top of the like cabbage worms and stuff that like attack those plants, and I just didn't stay up on it, and they just took over. They just ate the plants like crazy. The plants couldn't bounce back, and I did not do well with any of those plants. So that's one thing. I'm going to use bug netting over those plants, which I will be moving into a different space that has never been gardened, but this space was also never gardened. So I'm definitely going to have netting and make sure I'm being like proactive about keeping those bugs to nothing because they destroyed my plants. And so that was one thing. You can do neem oil, diatomaceous earth. What are some other things? there are some other ways to naturally treat for those. So that was one thing that really was a bummer. I didn't get anything from my brassicas. It was sad. So then I let the plants go to seed. I got to see broccoli seed. That was really cool. So I got to see them flower. The pollinators loved it. And so I'm kind of glad I did learn something, like, you know, what broccoli looks like when it goes to seed and how beneficial it was. And then I planted way too many peas. I planted both of my other arch trellises with peas, and I don't know why, because they can't crawl like beans do. They're a cool weather crop, and I just utilized too much space for them. I should have torn them out. I just didn't, because it was like no, they're doing so well. And they did really well. We ate a bunch of peas. We did stir fries and all kinds of things. And so, I don't know. It was just, I was so excited to plant things in the early spring that I just got overexcited and planted too many of them. So I did plant beans later in the year, but it was too late. They didn't have quite enough time to really thrive before the frost came. I tried to cover them. It didn't work. They just shriveled up, and then the beans got too soft. I should have taken all the beans off and just covered the plant and see if it would have, you know, survived it. But so that was a no. If I want to do 2 successions of beans, I have to really watch my window because they're really sensitive to the frost. I did have some tomato worms, but I really stayed on top of that, and they did not like really do any damage to my plants. I was able to catch them before they really started to get into my plants, so that helped a lot. My tomato plants did phenomenal. I had so many tomatoes, and now I know like how many plants I need to plant so that I can plan for sauces and, you know, soups and things with like the actual paste tomatoes and sauce tomatoes. And then slicer tomatoes. I had like 6 giant plants of slicer tomatoes. And it was a lot. But I learned a lot. I just didn't want to be without tomato plants. So this next year I will be planting a lot of different varieties. I had 3 of the same plants, and I was just learning. So I kind of picked easier plants and things that were just going to be easier to take care of. But tomato plants did really well. My basil plants, I planted with those like large varieties of tomatoes. So they gave the basil afternoon shade, and that really helped to keep it from bolting. That was a positive, really happy with that. And then, the last like major negative was corn. I did not realize we have crows here. We live close to a wooded area. Our backyard is all woods, and we have crows. And I didn't realize it until I was trying to figure out what is tearing out my corn kernels. Like as soon as they would have this much growth, the plant would be torn out and the kernel would be gone and the green was left. So I watched and just tried to keep a vigilant eye. I planted them again, and it was crows. They were literally pulling the things out when they were just little, and so the plant couldn't rebound from it, obviously, because it was torn out of the ground. But so I planted them again. I planted them 3 times, and I just ran out of time. It was by the time they were, you know, popped up and growing a little bit, they got torn out. So that, you know, took away another 2 weeks. And so I just ran out of time. They didn't have enough time. I also don't feel like that garden area, it was the in-ground garden where I put them in. I just don't feel like it had enough time to really have good soil. This is going to tickle. Have good soil and nutrition and stuff like that. So there's that. I don't know if there was just deficiency in the soil. I did not have the soil tested, so that could be it. But yeah, the corn was a fail. I did get some like little glass gem ears of corn that I made into like a little Indian corn display for fall. But that was like the only thing that I got. And then I saved the corn stalks and used them as decoration. But so it wasn't a complete fail, but as far as eating corn that I grew, no. We didn't eat any corn because I didn't have any. Celery was a slow starter, but it did really, really well. We had a bunch of celery. I planted way too many plants. But celery is a biannual, so you can cut and it will come again. Or you can harvest it as a whole and tear out the entire root system. We are moving, so I was like, well, we're just going to tear it all out because there's no use in me leaving it if, you know, the other person who's going to live here doesn't want celery or that much celery or doesn't want it to grow there. So I just ended up tearing it all out. We made cream of celery soup and fresh celery, but it was a lot of celery. And then jump over to the other bed. It was full of like Determinate tomatoes. I did have one indeterminate tomato, which was the Sun Gold cherry tomatoes. Those were amazing. I'm planting them again. I have seeds. I am starting those again. They were phenomenal. One of my favorite. They were snacking, just perfect in the garden, fresh when they're still warm, when the sun was shining on them. Viviana loved them, which makes my heart happy because having my child in the garden eating tomatoes makes me happy. So those were amazing. My Determinate tomatoes, one thing I did is I tried to just tie them to my cattle panel that I put through the middle of the bed, and I'm gonna need tomato cages. I just couldn't tie up enough of it to really get them to grow nicely. They had good spacing. I didn't get any like mold or mildew stuff on my tomatoes. The one I feel like got windburn or something. I'm not sure. There's something that tomatoes can get and they like curl up their leaves. There was one plant that did that in that bed, but all the rest of them did really, really well. And same with basil in those beds. The ones on my west side of that bed did bolt a little bit quicker than the other side just because of how the sun goes over the garden. And so that was one thing I definitely took a note of, is planting basil where it's going to have some afternoon shade, because it just did phenomenal. I had basil for a long time through the entire year, and none of the varieties were varieties that are slow to bolt or anything. They were just regular basil varieties. And so that was really exciting. I actually got to save seeds from the purple basil variety, which I think it's called Red Reuben. So that was really cool. Never got to do that. This is the first time I saved seeds was this year, and really enjoyed that. Oh, I had an Alaska nasturtium and a cucamelon plant in one of those big pots. And both of those plants are really vigorous and they need more space, and I just didn't give it to them. So my cucamelon plant never actually got really, really big, but I want to try that one again. I really like those. I think they're just like a pop of fresh cucumber. I don't even know how to explain the flavor, but they're just really fresh tasting. And so I want to be able to actually like have a big plant of them. And then the nasturtiums, I want to be able to just plant those. The Alaska nasturtium did phenomenal. Given it a lot of space, it was amazing. It had so many flowers. It actually set seed and then reseeded itself, but then like the frost came and it just couldn't survive. But that was really cool. So as far as the gardening season, I didn't really deal with a whole lot of things that were bad, other than the brassica plants. Those got wiped. That was a pretty substantial loss. That was sad, but I know now like I'm gonna need to just keep netting on them. And I had a lot of my brassicas all together, which I want because I don't want to just take up a bunch of space everywhere else. So I'm definitely going to do netting. And then just staying on top of aphids, I actually got lucky and we have a lot of natural ladybugs. So they kind of took care of my aphids because I didn't really have any problems with those afterward. And then my potatoes, I did not hill them a lot. I think I hilled them twice. And I should have done it more, especially for the German Butterball variety, which is a yellow variety. And I wanted those to get a lot bigger than they were. The red variety, I think it was like a French fingerling is what it's called. Those, I didn't mind that they were smaller because I kind of wanted them for smaller red potatoes, but I definitely have to note that I need to hill them to get larger potatoes. I also feel like I should have given a little more spacing in between each like seed potato. So that was a note. I didn't do bad on potatoes. Like that whole bed gave me a basket full of potatoes, not tomatoes, potatoes. And then my onions did really well. They didn't get really big though. So they're the Walla Walla onions and they should get really big. And what I realized is I didn't start the seed early enough because I did plant them from seed. So here in January now, I will be planting or starting those seeds from my different onion varieties because I want the bulbs to actually get really big. So that's exciting. I'm going to start some seeds soon, but those actually did okay. Like I got onions probably this size. They're not, yeah, I don't know, maybe 4-inch diameters. They weren't huge though, what I was wanting from the Walla Walla onions, but it was kind of nice because sometimes you only need a small onion. So that kind of worked out. And then my asparagus, that was kind of a bummer. I planted it to be a perennial, which I think it'll be fine. It'll come back next year. But I planted it beside parsley because there was like a tip that said parsley keeps asparagus beetles away. And it did not do that. Oh man, they ate a lot of those plants and they were the first year plants. So I don't know how they're going to come back next year. So I hope they do come back because that would be really cool to give like the next owner of this home asparagus that's already like planted and it's in its second year. So you can take some off in its second year. You're supposed to wait till the third year, but so goes. My strawberries did really well. However, I did read something that said on ever-bearing strawberries to cut all the flowers off until the beginning of June. So if I do start strawberries again, I will do that. And that would have been, I think that's going to be their second year. Yeah. And we got a lot of fruit, but then we had a lull. So I feel like it just had too much foliage and it wasn't focusing on putting blooms in because I just let the blooms be in the beginning of the year when they first started blooming. So that's one thing I'm definitely going to try and just see if it makes a difference. But I will be having a brand new strawberry bed somewhere on the new property because that's going to stay here. And then, oh, what else? Garlic, I'm not sure how it's going to do because this is the first time I planted it and I planted it here last fall. So in this next year, we should be having garlic, which the new owners, bless their hearts, told me I can come back and get as much garlic as I want. So that's going to be exciting to come back and see just the house again and see how the garlic's doing and stuff. And then, what else? Oh, as far as starting seeds, I will be doing a lot more vermiculite. I feel like I had a little bit of an algae problem on some of the seeds that take a while to germinate. So I'll be doing that. As far as like starting seeds though, I did really well. I did not have any cells that didn't come up. Yeah, everything went really, really well. I'm really thankful for that. I got to give a lot of started plants away, which was really fun. So there's a lot of people that got to grow tomatoes and peppers and stuff. Oh, peppers. I feel like they were behind the whole year. I did not realize that my seed starting mix did not have fertilizer in it. And the peppers are really specific about that. So they were kind of like a yellow green. They weren't like a dark, beautiful green in the beginning. So then I started fertilizing them. They started to get greener, but they were just behind the whole year. I did get peppers. We did get peppers though. But so that was just one thing I need to really make sure of to make sure that I'm giving them enough food to grow properly. But the peppers did really well. And then, yeah, seed starting went really well. I did herbs. I grew rosemary, which I'm actually looking at. It's on my kitchen table. I did rosemary for the first time growing from seed. I brought 3 plants inside because I wanted to make sure that I could take some with me. I think the other 2 plants will survive, but we'll see. And then my chives did all of my herbs did really well. So I'm curious to see, I don't know if you're supposed to do this, but I just left my green stock out there in the winter. And I don't know if they'll come back. Like those herbs are, some of them are perennials. And so I'm kind of curious to see if they'll actually come back. I don't know if that hurts the green stalk. I hope not, but we'll see. Time will tell, I guess. And then I think that's everything. One thing that was a big chore was just making sure the gardens all get watered. And I was hand watering with a hose and dragging it all over our property because our house, for some reason, they didn't put spigots in very natural areas. That was a chore. And I have a lot of landscape plants too, and container potting that I did. And it was a big chore to stay on top of watering. And sometimes I just didn't have time to do it, and it just got neglected sometimes. And so that's one thing I'm really wanting to focus on, is making sure we have good water systems. But I think that's everything. It was honestly a really fun year. I learned a lot of things. I'm excited for this next year. I will be starting a lot more seeds, hopefully having a lot more space to grow in, but it's going to take time because we're starting over basically. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with me, guys, and let me know, what you're in when you're gardening and how things are going, how your last year was, what you're excited for maybe this year, or if you're trying new things. I always like to hear from you guys. So hope you guys have a really great day, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.